Well, I kind of thought that the conversation would be kind of about the outsider insider perspective on Ireland, seeing as
Mm-hmm.
you came here 4 months ago, and
Mm-hmm.
you've had an opportunity now to see what Ireland is like. Um, and so
Mm-hmm.
you came at a very unusual time. First of all, we have very nice weather.
Yeah.
Um, Second of all, Croatia gets to the World Cup finals, and that must have made it feel like you were really far away from home. And
Not exactly, but okay. Yeah.
so I guess like we kind of start like a little bit around the whole. Maybe you saw an unusual side of Ireland in the sense that you arrived into a time when we were having the abortion referendum.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it kind of really presented a different picture of Ireland to the world.
Mm-hmm.
This very secular, materialistic
Mm-hmm.
country, as opposed to perhaps
Mm-hmm.
a more traditional view of Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say like that was surprising for you?
No, but that's because I'm not really prone to be surprised. I don't believe in, let's call them stereotypes about peoples and countries. Ireland has been branded in some kind of image even from times of John Ford movies and so on. Well, coming from where I'm coming from, you kind of learn to not believe those things on face value. My impression of abortion, that is this, how they call it, referenda on repeal of
The
what, Eighth
eighth,
Amendment?
the Eighth Amendment.
Yes. My impression was, and from the day one, that this is no debate, that this is not some kind of clash of opposing forces, but just a pure formality. That was my impression of this. I never doubted that they will repeal that amendment. And only thing I could see was this formal exchange of billboards. Yes, no. And in the same place even. So you had, for instance, in Selbridge, you had yes billboards, and then after a week they put no billboards. This is no debate. This is not, how should I put it, clash of opinions or kind of like a judgment moment in history. That question, I think, was settled long ago. I don't know history of it. Haven't had time to look into it in the detail, but that was my impression of somebody who is completely tabula rasa in Ireland, a newcomer.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really following it. I knew that I mean, if you have a country where Google, Facebook, Amazon, and others can have their let's say seat of power for now, they central offices are here. You won't have strong Catholic Church, and you won't have, if not Catholic Church, you won't have such amendments in constitution, because with Google and others there comes not only money but ideology they have. And so I couldn't wasn't surprised, because it seemed quite logical to me once you have all that business located here and prosperity that is, I suppose, based on that business, you will lose some things. And those things are, for instance, the part of Irish constitution. What impressed me and what drove me even to say a few things about it was celebratory mood. Was celebration. This was something I never seen before, because people can be talked into advocating abortion, gay marriages, even worse things, with arguments. Everything can be argued, but to celebrate something like this, to be happy about it, I mean, this is different. This is something that was really appalling, not only to me. I spoke to a few people about it. It was really unique.
It was very unique.
Yes, and I think it is. I don't know what the future will bring for Ireland, but in this sense, I think something here is definitely lost with that. The people made a decision that is to some, maybe in some dimension of it, irrevocable. This is very big step, and I don't really believe that country that 30 years ago was on the completely opposite trajectory just turned 180% painlessly into complete other direction. That's impossible. Something is suppressed there, and something people don't want to see, I think, in themselves. I don't know. I'm not Irish. I won't be long here anymore. I don't like when people tell Croats what kind of people they are, so I won't tell that to Irish. I will suspend judgment. But I have to admit, I was appalled by it very much. So talking with some co-workers, trying to skip that subject because I don't know. There is, I can say this, there is this atmosphere of indifference. Indifference towards things like whether the life should be preserved before birth and so on. The thing is, a question of abortion. Abortion is a murder that is not murder, or it is not murder, but it is murder. Why? Because it is kind of in the realm of possibilities. You never tend to see the physical act of it, although there is a very gruesome physical act. And people can be indifferent about it, although you deep inside you shouldn't be. And they are very easily talked into indifference. And listening to few young women at work talking about it, like talking of going to dentist, and taking this question, which I think for history of Irish people is very, very important. This was important when talking about it like something that was kind of like event of daily politics, like some football game that they won or something like that. I think it's devastating. That kind of indifference, I think, breeds eventually the worst things. It is worse than outright hatred or anger. Indifference, because indifference can produce only negativity. Nothing affirmative can get out of it. And so that was my impression, more or less.
Do you mean like indifference, like kind of apathy to the state of things?
No, I think indifference as an active choice, as I don't give a damn about something, as a choice, not apathy. Apathy would be if you are oppressed by something and you can't bear it anymore and you just go succumb to it. No, this is choice, I think. This is indifference by choice.
So it's a kind of this live and let live moral relativism, you know.
Yes, precisely that. But hypostasized, as Platonists would say, to nth degree, to a huge degree, I mean, to being so intense that you can't believe it if you are outside of it. And sometimes it's hard to blame people because this is the atmosphere they live in, especially when you... Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering, is that something that you think is particular in the Irish climate, or have you witnessed it elsewhere?
It is not endemic to Ireland, of course, and it is not generated in Ireland. If we are to talk about this technocracy, this sustainable development, such things, Irish didn't come up with this. These ideas are transnational, but if we are to choose nationality of their main theoreticians, some are Canadian, some are German, a lot of them is American, and so on. You won't find many Irish among them. So it's not that this was some kind of inner flow of Irish people, but I think Ireland was given an opportunity of this quick progress. People latched onto it unconsciously. They grabbed it. And they, I think, also unconsciously grabbed everything that comes with it, and that is not very good, and that will cost them a lot, and then just go with the flow. But I think the intensity of this in Ireland is really unique, because you have I never been to USA, but in USA, for some things, for instance, for gay marriage, maybe, which is, I think, very much connected issue with abortion and euthanasia. Three things go to in package usually. Euthanasia being the last, I think. In America, they had to legalize gay marriage, or how they put it, I don't remember the legal definition, from 2015, I think, by the act of Supreme Court, without consulting anybody, because they knew that something like referenda would never pass. But in Ireland, you have 64% of people in the country where families were huge until 20 years, 30 years, going complete opposite direction and voting in 64% voting in favor of this, in favor of repealing the sentence that only affirms the right of the child to live. As much as I understand, the Eighth Amendment is one sentence or two sentences, not much. This not only can't be good, this is borderline insane. This is not normal. This is not a normal political process, to my eyes, where you have a slow change of opinion. This is very radical in a rather short span of time. So, what do you think? Because you know Ireland far better than me.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, even though you said that it would be passed, right up until the very end, I actually thought that it wouldn't. I actually had some idea that it wouldn't, so I hadn't seen it. But then I live in a very rural area, attached onto the only area in the country who actually voted not to repeal.
Yeah.
So the general mood around here was probably different than on the East Coast. It's quite different, Like personally, I see, like, on a bigger scale, the biggest problem that I see at the moment is this moral relativism that seems to be like the go-to position for modern people on everything, like, who am I to say what you should do? You should do what you want, live your life,
Yes.
this kind of thing. And I don't know where that came out of. And I think that the symptom in Ireland, say, for example, recently was the abortion referendum, for example. People are afraid to seem old-fashioned. People are afraid to seem moralistic. There's a terrible fear of appearing to be moralistic, because as soon as you say something that has some moral dimension to it, it's like saying the word God. It's not acceptable anymore, So that's, and like you, well, I also can see times when abortion might be required, So, I think a lot of people voted because they thought this was the good thing to do, that they were doing something good, that they were providing for the hard cases or something like that, But I personally think that the possibility for the hard cases was already there. I don't know, I was very surprised. I really hated to see those pictures that were beamed all over the world the next day, like of thousands of people gathered in Dublin Castle in this triumphant euphoria, That was just incredibly embarrassing. And actually, I did speak to a lot of people who had voted yes, and I asked them what did they think of these pictures, and everybody universally was embarrassed. It was an embarrassing moment. So, but I don't think people saw that this was going to happen, that by doing something that they thought was the modern progressive thing to do, that then when they saw the results of all these people, they were embarrassed. From the people I've spoken to, including people who voted yes, And I've asked other people to ask their friends, and they asked their friends, and everybody was embarrassed. So that's something.
Well, that's something, but that's
Post facto.
post facto, that's an afterthought of a woman who, after drunken night, few days later discovers that she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And that she shouldn't have done it. I don't think. I don't know. I see your point, but I mean, I think it was incredibly immature, and this is not something that can happen only to Irish. Most of the people that are considered non-progressive, and this includes my peasants also, can fall for this, and
Yeah.
some of them do fall, but not at this rate.
But you will see this happening. I do think that you will see this kind of. I mean, I don't mean just in relation to abortion, because obviously Croatia has had abortion for a long time, but
Yes.
in relation to other progressive ideas, you know, and
Hmm.
what it means to be alive and what it means to be human and what the purpose of human life is, you will see this unfolding in the next 10 to 20 years in even the most village areas in Croatia, you
Hmm.
know. You know,
Yes, but in Croatia, Croatia has a legacy of communist laws. Croatian constitution even is a rewriting of communist constitution by one of the greatest assholes in Communist Party in Croatia. So Croatia is a post-communist state. That's a special case, because in Croatia, I don't know how big are abortion rates, but abortion is not really a thing to go for. I believe, maybe I'm not in tune with how younger people live nowadays, but it was never something that girls or women were eager to do. It is not something. It is not understood as something good in a public consciousness. Whereas here it is. People got duped into seeing it as some kind of step forward. But I think all they did is they repealed the definition of that protects the child. That's what they repealed. They didn't repeal impediment to women's choice directly. They revoked practically the definition of a child, unborn child, as a human being, person. So
that is quite fundamental. You know, that
yeah.
it is a different. It's about the sacrality or the sacredness of human life. I mean, that's going to attack the very principles.
But the thing is, you said people didn't want to appear like something. They didn't want to appear regressive, blah blah blah. Yeah, but that's a main problem, I think, with this this ideology that we all share, and to an extent, live and let live, as it is called. Some call it liberalism. Alexander Dugin likes to call it that, so I try to avoid expression whenever I can. So. Not to share anything with his ideas. He's a different kind of danger. This is ideology. This is metaphysics. This is understanding of human being as pure individual that has a tendency to liberate itself from him or her, from gender, from all qualities and properties. Because this liberation, you see how this goes off the charts in the West. Now, when people are changing, not only changing sex, but then you have people who want to change the species, want to become animals and such things. The people still consider this as funny. But the thing like gay marriages was something that every normal leftist would ridicule in Europe of 1989. Now nobody ridicules it, because people have been astroturfed into thinking that it is possible to have, I don't know how would I explain this, to have a manifestly absurd, contradictory thing happen. But the reason why they want it, the reason is because everybody for himself wants to be absolutely free in his or her choices. Problem being that if you take this route, sooner or later you'll start to lose this he, she, even gender qualities. You start to lose qualities. You go into nothingness, nothingness of the pure will that has, and this is the essence I think the essence of this.
By like
Met-
by human will we create ourselves. Is that what you mean? That we go towards
yes,
this,
yes.
that we create ourselves only according to our own will. It's funny because in the last 2 weeks I've been involved in a debate online about transgenderism because,
Hmm.
even more so than abortion or anything, the whole transgender ideology is what really grinds my gears at the moment. It's just really, I cannot understand how such a tiny percentage of people have managed to impose an ideology on a vaster society in such an extent that they pass
Hmm.
policy decisions, laws, education protocols, to actually deny biology.
Yes, yes.
I don't know how they have this much power.
But they don't. It's not their power. It's
Whose power?
power of corporation and political elites that is mostly these transnational elites. For instance, UN power, UN ideological power, because UN pushes this. NGOs, most European Union-based NGOs also take this as a matter of course, trans rights and so on and so forth. The politics, the Lisbon Treaty of European Union is built upon sustainable development.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. This is not, as you noticed, this is a good question. How come the grassroots movement of 0.5% of humanity accomplishes this? It doesn't. It's not the grassroots. It's from above. This
But
is
what is the
astroturf.
purpose? What could be do you think it's about this atomization of the individual, this atomization of the family structures? What is the purpose?
I think, well, purpose would imply, purpose as a conscious purpose would imply that there is some kind of overall plan. I'm not sure about this conspiratorial aspect. You have a politics of sustainable development that is intended to manage people as resources in conjunction with resources of nature and resources of overall economy, raw materials and so on. When you identify what you get with sustainable development, very flowery rhetorics, you have identification of human being with a thing to be managed. That's only thing that it is. That's sustainable development. The word was invented by Gro Brundtland, a Norwegian. I think she was prime minister in the 80s, and Neo Malthusian. By Neo Malthusian, I mean the main idea is reduction of population in the world. This is where it comes from. But I think there is a tendency that is not only ideological and political, it's a tendency in people, unconscious tendency, historically developed tendency of this individualism that is coming to a grinding halt. It's coming to its logical extreme and showing itself to be absolutely destructive. And what you get now is reactions. For instance, you have. I was listening to some people at work talking about Donald Trump, and it took me 3 days of listening to them to understand that they really believe that Russians somehow elected Donald Trump into office, which is complete bullshit. I don't want to waste words on this, but the reason being as they don't understand, for instance, that Donald Trump was elected to a large extent because of this, because people saw him, at least in America, as a kind of somebody who is symbol of resistance against this, which is also pretty much bullshit. But
I know.
Yeah, people react in politics. You can't when you go into politics, you have to want to win. This is not about the truth anymore. It's about winning. So, ideal candidate does not exist. But Trump is other extremity. He is the man who symbolizes chaos, irreverence, ridicule, and such things, which is also that is a different kind of indifference. And what I'm afraid of, what I think will happen eventually, at least in some parts of Europe, will be a rise of ultra-right, because there is no other way this drive of the people can go but to the right, which is okay. if that is a rational right, if that would be right, that was tempered by, as in the past, it was tempered sometimes by Catholic Church when Catholic Church was led by a right man. Sometimes it wasn't. But now nothing can temper drive to the right. So there is no way of stopping this. I'll give you an example why. For Ireland, you have this plan of repopulating Ireland. Yeah. So it would be, if I understood correctly, 2 million people in, say, 20 years.
Yeah.
And they are marketing this plan and at the same time marketing abortion. So I'm sure that one or two Irish, to be ironic, already made 2 + 2 equation. This means that this repopulation will not be by Irish, that
Sure.
Irish is not meant, but by people from abroad. So this is attack on ethnic groups or ethnic historical societies. And I'm aware of this for a long time. I'm not writing a lot about it because I don't want to fuel the fires of people who would let's say
Go far right. Who would move towards the right.
Yeah, I don't have problem of moving towards the right when things are so far left. But there has to be this let's say this discernment of right and wrong. You can't just go into when you are bothered with this political correctness. You shouldn't let yourself being driven into rage against black people or something like that. This is where it will go. It will inevitably, I think at least, okay, I won't be some kind of doomsayer, but I think it's inevitable to go into that direction. And the only question is, will it be tempered or not? And I don't think it will be.
No.
And I don't know. I think that it's confusing to me also. I'm not the one with answers, but more with questions. But I cannot unsee what I see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing. Like, I mean, that a discussion I was having on an Irish board, it's a very big Irish board about transgenderism, was actually shut down this morning on the grounds that I was bringing the mood low. The mood must never be lowered. People must always feel good, you know. So to actually put things out there that are actually challenging, you know, that's a bummer, you know. So it is closed, you know, so debate is closed down, you know, so how can there be a tempering if there is no debate? I don't see a centre. I don't see a centre. That's...
Centre doesn't hold, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
That's well said. That was the term I was looking for, not left and right, but centre. But not in political sense, but the centre of the world, the axis.
Absolutely.
We lost that, yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, you see, that's the thing, like, even when I think about, even just to go back to the abortion thing, right? For me personally, as a human being, if you're going to be a developed human being, you should have an awareness of, well, your embodiment, you know, so therefore you take responsibility for your activities. And for me, some of this imposed down regulation, liberal regulation, takes away responsibility. So people can be unintelligent and, you having a good time all the time
Mhm.
rather
Mhm.
than working through things and being aware and educating themselves, and challenging themselves
Mhm.
and disciplining themselves. I think these are all essential parts of being human, to be a real
Yes.
human being.
Well, I think one of the central things of being human is being piece of shit also,
Yeah.
because that's what we are.
Yeah.
That's not all we are, but that's what we are. I can
Yeah.
tell you this from my own day-to-day life, because I share a house with two idiots from Balkans. We are very, very close, and uh, Balkans has this goodness of people. They can people in Balkans, or Serbs, Croats, Greeks, Albanians, whatever. You will be hard pressed to find more hospitable people and more true friends
Mm.
at the same time. This is the place where those friends and brothers, everybody calls his friend, oh brother,
Mm.
cut each other throats.
Yeah.
So, and we are very aware of that. And
Mm.
for instance, there is a group of us. We are very close. We talk about these things, do mischief around Ireland when we have time for it. But we talk about this damn Balkans of ours, where one thing you learn is this finitude of man. That is to say, incapability. That man is not capable to remain good by his own efforts.
Mm.
That he needs something higher. That only higher love can heal
Yeah.
some rifts. Yeah. That's what Balkan. That's a slice of Balkan. Balkan is good, I think, to understand this. This idea you are talking about of ever being nice. That's something I noticed in Ireland. The best compliment you get, you are nice.
Mm.
To an extent that Poles need Poles. I know this. They need some pessimism in the morning. You have to say that, oh,
Sure.
it's gonna be a shit day, and they, oh, thank you, and so on. And this is the negation of reality,
Mm.
and it suppresses frustration. I think, for instance, in Irish society, I can tell you only what I sense, not what I
Mm.
know. There is a lot of things suppressed. That sometimes before decades ago, the conservative Ireland suppressed everything. Now progressive Ireland suppresses everything in the with the different methods, but to a same effect. And I must say, I feel very sorry for the people, not in condescending way, but really emotionally. I feel that they are lost. Uh, I don't know. It kind of doesn't make me mad. More like makes me sorry.
Yeah.
Not only for them, sorry in general, because it's sad.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, maybe it's a kind of maybe we partake of the Northern Reserve, I mean, considering that we've have our Viking ancestry, maybe it's the reserve, maybe it's a lack of Mediterranean kind of expressiveness or something like that. Yeah. Now I don't know where I'm going to take back up again there.
Viking ancestry and being reserved.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
but
yeah, I see, in truth, in Ireland, there's the West and the rest. Okay, so
mm-hmm,
there is a big difference between the East Coast of Ireland, where you've been,
uh-huh,
you've been staying in the
mm-hmm,
economic centres, and
mm-hmm,
say it's a lot different over in the
mm-hmm,
West. So people. I find people, like, if I meet them on my road out here, I find people quite expressive in terms of this sense of irony, or this kind of that, that we all have this dark side and this dark core.
mm-hmm,
I think it more expresses in Ireland in melancholy. it's
mm-hmm,
it's it's not as much this, oh, I don't know what the word for it is, a kind of a tough realism. We have more
mm-hmm,
melancholy, I think, personally.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And you find that when people get drunk or something like that, that a lot of melancholy and sadness comes out.
mm-hmm,
And I mean, maybe that's where Irish people have learned to express their sadness is
mm-hmm,
in drunken state. I mean, that's possible.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, but another thing I wanted to talk about was, you were talking about the right being tempered at times by the Catholic Church, and that has fallen away. And I know that from some of your writings, perhaps it was a conversation we had where you were saying about people shouldn't judge the church on, say, the bad actions of one or two priests. But one of the big problems for Ireland was that there was this endemic institutional abuse that came from the Catholic Church. And this actually totally traumatized people. So it's not possible to write it off as individual priests or occasional nuns or something like that. So it's not possible to write it off as just an individual here and there. It was actually endemic. And I think that this was actually what happened to begin to make people feel ashamed of being considered not progressive, or ashamed of being tied to the past. So I do think that's a big important part in things.
Yes, I heard a lot about that, but there is one thing about, I mean, for instance, pedophilia scandals of Catholic Church. I don't think on Ireland now, because this not pedophilia scandal. This was system of abuse. Yeah. Where pedophilia cases are minuscule in number in comparison to how big organization is, and this is something that was used as a weapon against Catholic Church. Of course, Catholic Church helped things by not ejecting those pedophiles when they could, but it was a very complex question why popes never did it, John Paul II and later Ratzinger, but they were denounced mostly by other priests. But this is a different question. In Ireland, I know more or less what was going on, at least what people told me. But the problem is, I think Irish people forget one thing, that those priests came from their families. I think they were Irish priests. Now, I wouldn't be going comparing country by country, but the idea that a woman that has a child out of wedlock or something like that should go into some institution. I never heard in Croatia, Poland, Hungary. I don't think we had anything like that. Even in the 18th century, we are a Catholic country. So it was endemic for Ireland, and I think it has to do with the structure of family. Because one thing with pedophilia, I know, is, for instance, one of the more stupid propaganda tools against the priesthood was that you become pedophile for a lack of sex, so celibacy should be revoked. Pedophilia is to a large extent a family disease. It comes from family. I say this, I won't go into numbers, I don't have them on head, but I knew one of the Croatian top experts for this, because we have it in Croatia, of course, in some numbers. And this is what I remember vividly. She told me this, that almost always it's a family thing. So this is I think people, it's very easy to say this was kind of like some outside institution that oppressed us, but I think it was more like people oppressing themselves. The failing of Catholic Church was letting this happen, because Catholic Church is a universal. They could have stopped it, but in times church is huge and wicked and old. But it is still church, for me at least. You don't reject it just like that, but it is a huge organization that throughout history, if you want to see it as a kind of communion of saints, I think you are at the level of 5-year-old. And some people leave church simply on this, because they think they should be some kind of enlightened Mahatmas, and so it's impossible. It's a geopolitical organization to a large extent. They have to make compromises. I mean, truth be told, when you read the Gospels, the very apostles were not very likable people, and we had huge problems in understanding what they are receiving. It's obvious. So But in Ireland, I think what you said, I think stands. Ireland is a very specific case. I heard a lot about it when I came here, but I don't think it's excuse. I think this is wrong. You can't you can't just cut off yourself from your history like it never was. This is. I mean, you can do it, but I think consequences will be dire.
But do you not think that is specifically what's happening nowadays? Is that people are trying to cut themselves off from history? People
Yes.
don't even know history.
Yes, but they don't have to know it. I don't think it's about knowing facts. It's about what is in us, because a lot of we didn't just pop up in the world. We are living deposits of ancestry, absolutely so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the major event in the young man's male life. I don't know about women. Major event is when you realize how alike your father you are, and that you will never be able to escape it, and you have to accept this. This is the point, and this is the point where your freedom starts. Because you see that little percentage, that window of opportunity that is given to you to go further.
Yeah.
And this is the thing with history. You don't have to know your history to be part of it, to have impulses that are in fact given kind of like to this part of the world that gave you birth to your motherland and so on. Cutting, you are right. I think cutting from this is the major impulse. I think it's an impulse that is also supported and promoted by transnational institutions like EU. It has to be because idea of EU is very hard to implement if this is not cut off. The first thing they cut off, in my opinion, is Christian heritage. That is to say that Europe is a product of Catholic Church, and this is something.
You think
this is something that people.
You think that's intentional?
Yes,
from the beginning.
From the beginning, 100%. So, because if it was only a kind of like decorative statement that they could make and then do what they want, they would put it in. John Paul II was constantly nagging about this. I remember that. I was younger, but I didn't care. I was pissed off at church at that time, which is quite normal. Catholic who is not pissed off and even hates the church at times is not proper Catholic. But what happened is that no way they would let this, because this is very important to them. They will act as it is not important. It is. This is the legacy they want out. The legacy of, let's leave Catholic Church aside for a minute, legacy of metaphysics, theology, belief in God, belief in transcendence, belief that Europe is on the palm of someone bigger than technocrats and so on. This idea had to be ejected. And everybody who says that this idea is obsolete, childish, should remember that Eurocrats couldn't accept it. They know it is in contradiction to their project, and this gives it this kind of like proves it via negativa, I think, with this enmity. And you have sustainable development. It's either or.
I remember reading one time that the whole sustainable development movement was linked to people like Maurice Strong and stuff like that, who actually have this kind of very new agey sort of spiritual ideas. So do you think do you think that there's some sort of pseudo spirituality type thing in the EU project as well?
Oh, should be. I think they were not so particular about it as UN. UN has this new age vibe and
Theosophy.
Strong. The European Union, I think, is more pragmatic. There is not that much of that. I haven't noticed, but it's a project that relies on ideas that would be considered Masonic in 19th century. Now they are mainstream. You don't have to call it. Don't need a secret society to implement them. But I think main thing with European Union is, although European Union could be a great thing, the main thing is this creation of a common European identity that at the expense of every other identity. There is no way around it. The way they conceive it is such that you just can't have federation of peoples. You have to have one huge soup melting pot. And why is this so? Because I think because the European Union is a sustainable development technocratic project which is intended to be managed from top down and managed in a scientific sense. And you have to have a very simple parameters. So you have Croats, Serbs, Hungarians, just like signifiers, geographical signifiers of workforce. This is what they need in sustainable development. This is what makes you human. Anything deeper than that complicates things. They don't want it. Of course, in practice, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't work. It will never work. I think it's a totalitarian idea that is very hard to implement. It is sinister because it is implemented by giving you something, not by taking something away from you. By giving you, inflating human rights, for instance, and making you dependent on this system. But I don't think it works that much. Maybe I don't get it because I live in a part of the world that is so backward and so dysfunctional bureaucratically that you can't implement anything, let alone sustainable development. So you can't sustainably develop us. But I think it doesn't work really in the West. In Ireland, I think it works fine. I was surprised that people so fell for it here because here you have a feeling that it is accepted, this way of thinking. And I don't know. I don't know how it will play out. I don't think, as you asked me, is it a new age? I wouldn't say. I never noticed too much of this in Europe. That's something you get with UN. UN is very, but UN is also sustainable development high church. It's a secular church. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I think you say how the project was implemented so successfully in Ireland, and from what I remember, one of the reasons was that we were actually very poor. I mean, maybe the same like Croatia, maybe even poorer.
I think you were poorer in the 70s.
I think so. I think
100%. Yeah. Yugoslavia was very well off.
And the poorness also brought a sense of shame. But then, having said that, we've always been, for so long, a colonized people as well, you know. So from, say, the time of the establishment of the Free State until going into the EU is only 50 years. It's not long enough to actually learn how to be an independent people. So from the very beginning was this idea that we were incredibly poor when we came to the EEC at the time, and that they gave us everything. And so the idea from the very beginning was that we came with a begging bowl, and that they filled it, and that we're so grateful. And I used to find that idea very strange. I used to find it very demeaning because, well, for a start, I felt like that we sold our fishing box. We had the most fishing waters in all of Europe, and I have seen statistics where it shows that if you add up all the value of the catch, Ireland has been a net contributor, but since even 1973. So this idea that we were coming like beggars was a manufactured idea, in my opinion. You know, so, and I think this is the reason why. We also, being a colonized people, we also were used to the idea of having authority. We always liked, in a way, it felt better to have authority than to be self-responsible, you know. So I remember in the mid-80s, I went to college and I was studying law, and one of the main subjects at the time was EEC law, or European law as it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, in the libraries in University College Dublin, like, there was all these shelves full of, English law and Irish law, and then there was this mushrooming shelves of European law. So, like, we're only in 10 years and already
Uh-huh.
everything is being regulated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, stacks and stacks and stacks of European directives.
Mm-hmm.
It was like this, it's technocracy, like you say. It's this kind of
Yeah.
scientific management of every single aspect of your life. I mean,
Yes.
what size the eggs are, what size,
Uh-huh.
the fish is, what size, where you're allowed to collect turf, or what you must do with your trees. Everything was regulated. So even after 10 years, it was just astonishing to me. And I mean, I was very young, but I found it very sinister from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Just this idea. But then I've told you before the story, then I went over to Europe in the mid 80s and hung out with some people that were high officials in the EEC. And the thing that I found interesting was that there was this almost the contrast between this fastidious legislation and then the excessive sensual lifestyles of the
Mm-hmm.
bureaucrats that were imposing this system on the peasantry. It was just so stark to me, these people eating raw steak and octopus, and yet
Mm-hmm.
telling other people how many cows they could have on their land.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was like it was immediately like an elite, an elite that had no idea of the ordinary people, but also a very debaucherous. They were very debaucherous.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I suppose it was amazing to me to see how very ordinary Irish people had gone over and immediately dived into these waters.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, like, because I was coming from a very rural background, it was very stark. I just couldn't
Yeah,
help.
yeah.
I couldn't help but see everything, and I didn't say anything, but I just watched in wonder.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, even if it has become slightly more transparent and modern, it's still a feudal system.
Yes, yes.
So
I mean, you had you learn it the best way one can learn it. Too bad that only individuals can get such experience. I, for instance, don't. In the 90s, I didn't know what the European Union was. I was thinking about other things, But to have this insight in 80s, it's quite a feat. Both the experience of somebody like a real eurocrat and to notice these stacks of laws. This happened to me only in the 2000s. For instance, I'll give you one example about this micromanagement. I remember seeing for the first time in Croatia what you now have in Ireland, even in my house. Landlady puts it in the kitchen when she wipes the floor. Warning, slippery floor, you can fall. When I saw that crap in Croatia, we were laughing, but of course you will fall if you are an idiot. In Ireland, of course, and now more or less in bigger cities, one of those two big cities in Croatia, you have these things. You can get sued if you are running a cafe or whatever pub. Somebody slips and there was no sign, he can sue you to kingdom come. But people don't realize what is obvious, that this is micromanagement. This is not here to help you. This is here to make you an idiot and to manage all relationships. One thing I realized in Ireland, the first thing that strikes you when you come from this Balkan Eastern European country is that when you cross the street on the pedestrian crossing, people actually stop with their cars. This is not something that happens in southern Croatia, and you are advised to be careful.
I spent a month in Bulgaria and Romania last year trying to avoid traffic. So.
Yeah, but you know why people do that? Because if you whatever you do in Ireland with your car to pedestrian, you are automatically to blame. They're doing this because they are afraid. not because they are polite. And everything is managed in this way, and with these slippery floors. What is interesting, when you take immigrants, for instance, my Croat friends, and pretty good people, so it makes it even worse. They see it as a great thing. The only thing they can see is a success, but they don't see the price of it. They think this is a great thing. This all has its whys. Now you have these strong insurance companies, so nobody can fuck nobody over and so on. But they don't understand that it is micromanagement of everything, and that you have country, at least the eastern part. I realized I've been in the west for a day to Galway, not Galway, but close. That in the east, all countries, land is fenced off.
Yeah.
You feel like a rat in the maze. Maybe Irish people are used to it, but I was talking to some Poles who are in Ireland for 12 years now, and this friend of mine tells me to this day he feels like a rat in the maze. And I know there is a rationale that farmers want to keep. You have livestock, you can just let it walk and so on, but it is not natural. I mean, you can't. You have this beautiful country you can't walk through. You have road. You have village, you have city, and you have everything fenced off. Nobody would shoot you, of course, if you go walking into his barley. I don't think people are like that. But this is, for instance, I don't know, is this something of older date? But in sustainable development, you have this land management, where idea was, I never really looked too much into this aspect because this is not my expertise, but a very important aspect is the management of land, of trying to keep people off the land, out of nature, to keep them in sustainable, let's say, townships, cities, whereas they would have only limited access to nature, and nature would thrive, because both nature and human are systems of resources that have to be balanced in sustainable development. That can also be.
I have seen that aspect in public opinion, and it actually surprised me a lot, in the sense that I live in a very rural area, and if ever I put forward an opinion, say on a discussion board, about services in rural Ireland or something like that, people say, oh, why should the taxpayer fund you people who live in the countryside? If you want any services, move to the city, move to the towns or something like this. And it's almost like as if there's this resentment of anybody who dares to live in the countryside, and that really surprised me. But that is part of the EU regulation. I mean, there's even around here, people are cutting trees constantly in the hedgerows, and it's all to do with I can't remember the name of the common agricultural policy. It's in order to get money, every month, because the farmers get money every month from the EU, they have to manage their land in certain ways that have been determined for them. So, it's definitely there, the micromanagement. Yeah.
Especially this thing in Ireland, this some sense of silence I get here from the day one.
Yeah.
And of suppression, and I'm fascinated how these Croat immigrants, how stupid they are. They are so elated with the country, and they end up hating it. I'll never hate it, because I don't know. I kind of grasp reality. They are fascinated with this. The guy tells me, Irish sold everything, but that's the best thing to do.
To sell everything. Oh yeah, to sell all your kind of inner life.
Yeah, he said no. He meant sell the country to Google and so on.
Right,
so but this is implied.
Yeah.
And he doesn't see implications. So, idiots. Now that's with the Croats also long time dependent, oppressed, suppressed. There is a kind of similar mentality there, so they fall for this.
Yeah, I don't know.
Very.
I mean, I was an immigrant in the 80s, and I lived in London, and I also lived in Germany for 3 years. And to be honest, like that kind of attitude was also there among Irish expatriates.
Uh-huh.
This kind of how brilliant Germany is, how brilliant,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
how I
yeah.
can never go back to that, hellhole of Ireland, how, there's no opportunities there, how you can't be free, how you can't be yourself, how you can't be anonymous. I mean, so that maybe is a kind of a perspective of some immigrants that's the way that's.
Yes, yes. Yes, but I expect some people who are my age to be smarter. It's when you're young in your 20s, everything is great if it is opposite of home. But when you come in your 40s, I mean, and they are all looking for quote unquote normal life. That's very interesting thing. This normal life of theirs, I don't know what is this.
Yeah,
I never had something like that. Never been interesting in it.
yeah,
But I think it's mostly about it is just a diversion to say that the real motive is money.
yeah,
They want to make money. This
yeah,
is why people come here. Um, well, I'm a bit different, of course. I want to make money, but it's never the main thing.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. No, I can understand. I mean, like money seems to be. I mean, we live in a very money-driven world, and
yeah.
that's just the way it is.